Hello and welcome to I Want to Find You as Much as You Want to Find Me. This is about the story of one hiring manager and how I failed all of the times in order to find the right people. So let's start off with who are y'all in the audience and who am I? I'll talk about that too. So there should be a poll that pops up because of the magic of the internet. Um, and I'm going to actually be on the chat as well. So if you have comments or questions during the presentation, I'll be on the chat listening in and addressing other things that come up. But to start off, for those of you that are here, how many of you are currently a hiring manager? How many of you want to be a hiring manager? Or how many of you in the audience are job seekers or not hiring managers? This talk is most specifically geared towards people that are hiring, but it will definitely be useful to those of you that are looking for a job as well. And then in the appendix, and of course I'll make this presentation available to you, in the appendix I have some additional tips for job seekers as well. So a little bit about me. I have been doing UX research for the past 17 years. I've worked in healthcare, banking, and tech. About 12 of those years were at Microsoft, where I was building and managing research teams throughout much of that time there, as well as now with my own company, Authentic UX. I've interviewed hundreds of researchers and designers over the past 17 years almost. And most importantly, I've made a lot of mistakes in trying to find those right people. So first, a few truths about the system. It's flawed. The entire process of trying to find people and hire people is a flawed system. And it's because interviewing is a curated experience. That means that you as a job seeker are trying to put forth your best face to the world. And it's the same on the other end as well. As hiring managers, we really want to find the best person. And we're trying to find that best person as well as we can, but also help you want to work at our company at the same time. And so we're both trying to do our best to show the happy parts, but the difficulty in finding the right people is that sometimes you have to look for those difficult parts or not as good parts to help eliminate people. Another aspect of what's going on here is that you're being evaluated on how you seem and not who you are. And this is a key aspect of the hiring process because it's curated, because we're trying to put forth a certain face to the world. It makes it really difficult to actually understand who a person is. And as we're evaluating candidates from the hiring perspective, we're actually not evaluating who you are. We're just evaluating how you show up. And I have an article that I have a link to in a later slide about that exact point. But we're really looking at, do you seem like you're a person that's on time? Well, on this interview, you were late. So you don't seem like you're a person that's on time. If it were important, then you show up that way. Another aspect of this is that we all really make mistakes. And a piece of this that's really important is actually that sometimes we don't know that we're making those mistakes as we're making them. And that's a really key thing here, because as we are trying to find that person to fit in our team, sometimes we get distracted or pick the wrong person, and sometimes we miss the right person. And it all comes down to this process of really trying to start from everybody at the top of the funnel and sort down into just the right people, the diamond in the rough, as Jafar says. This is the link at the bottom here to an article that I wrote about how to stand out to your potential employers, written from the perspective of a hiring manager. So let's make this really geeky and researchy, because I think about this in terms of type 1 and type 2 errors. So at the top, you have your hypothesized outcome, and then you have your actual outcome on the left. And so when you're looking at true positive is probably the easiest place to start. You think it's the right person and you're right. You hired the right person. Yay. This is exactly what we want to happen all the time. And the counter of that is the true negative. You don't think it's the right person and you're right. You didn't hire that person that was not the right person also a positive thing. That's what we want to happen as we are interviewing people throughout the hiring process. Where we have to be in looking out for are the type 1 and type 2 errors. So the type 1 error is the false positive. You think it's the right person and you hire them, and then it turns out they were a disaster. And I've hired lots of these people. And it didn't work out for one reason or another. And that's what we're trying to avoid. And so the rest of this presentation is actually to look out for how to avoid these false positives. False negatives happen too, where you don't think it's the right person, but then later on retrospect, you realize that actually you were wrong and it was the right person and that you didn't get that right, unfortunately. So let's start with the easy ones, the true negatives. And over time, I would say it's much easier to spot the deal breakers and the red flags early on in the process. There was one interview, it was a phone interview with someone that they said, oh yeah, I think that this would look really good on my resume. Like, this is not a reason for me to hire you as a potential employee. My job is not to try to like give opportunities to the world so that everyone has great things for their resume. No, that's not a reason. Negativity, or just feeling like you can do everything on your own. This is a really interesting one, because I think that there's this misperception that being able to Google all of your answers to find out how to do something is shown as being proactive, but actually to me, it shows up as trying too hard, when you could just say like, hey, I don't know how to do this. Like, oh, okay, here, let me tell you exactly what to do. It saves so much more time than like you spending a bunch of time trying to figure something out on your own. And we've hired some of these people in the past, and that's why this is on here, because it's not good to try to go off and do something on your own. It's about communication, personality clashes, and emotional meltdowns. I've interviewed people that couldn't get along with one of the interviewers. I've interviewed people that had emotional meltdowns throughout the process. Like, if the interview is too stressful, the job definitely will be. So finding any of these situations where this happens is a red flag. It's a deal breaker. It's a, hey, this is not going to work out. Too set in their ways. That's the last one. I've had people say like, yeah, I do this, but I don't do this, this, and this. I'm like, okay. And that's not really going to work, because yeah, doesn't work. So the thing about the true negative is that like over time, you get better and better about spotting the things that matter to you and what's going to make sense for your team culture. And so as you are trying to wade through the people to find the perfect person, then it's really important to see these red flags and then to just call it out and say, hey, this is not going to work. And the sooner you do that throughout the process, the less time both of you waste. So this, of course, brings up the question, how do you find these true positive and avoid these false negative people? Well, Greg McEwen says to be ridiculously selective in hiring people. This is because as soon as you get a bad person in, they can end up causing more and more damage to your team. So much so that Guy Kawasaki calls it a bozo explosion, because bad people beget more bad people and draw more bad people to them. And suddenly you have a formerly great team that just descends into mediocrity. And I've seen that happen with good teams that become bad. You bring one bad person in, and all of a sudden it's just the snowball effect of more bad people. And life is too short, and work is already hard enough as it is. And research is actually a hard thing. So it's really important to get those right people. What if you hire the wrong person? The false positive of this scenario here. Well, Adam Grant says that the negative impact of a taker on a culture is usually double to triple the positive impact of a giver. This is taken from his TED Talk. The link is at the bottom here, where he talks about the difference between givers and takers. And takers are always the bad ones. The takers are the ones that you don't want to have on your team, because they're always in it for themselves and not about helping other people. The tip that he gives in the talk that I'll share here is to ask people if they could name three names of people that they have significantly impacted their lives in a positive way. The takers will always talk about people that are above them in the political hierarchy, and the givers will talk about people below them or at any different level. So that's one quick little trick there to find those people. But he says it's really about weeding out the takers. So when you're selecting, effective hiring, screening, and team building is not about bringing in the givers. It's about weeding out the takers. So it's really about making sure that you don't get those takers, the bad ones, the true negatives, and that'll help you get closer to finding the right people. And this last piece here I think is so great. You can learn a lot about a character by how someone treats their restaurant server or their Uber driver. I've seen this to be really true. And I've even heard stories of people that will not get job offers because they didn't hold the door open for someone. Now, I don't personally go through setting up experiments like this, but the mentality is the right one here, that you can really learn about someone's character by how they treat others. And in a profession like UX research, where we're working with people all the time and we're working with stakeholders for our projects, but we're also working with end users and people that are, just coming in to be a part of a study. Outside of COVID times, it's actually like really wonderful to be able to interact with so many different people. But you have to be an agreeable person in order to do that well, because you need to make that person feel comfortable. And that involves some emotional, a bit like IQ. So how do we get to the true positive? Developing your hiring strategy. And it is a strategy. And it's because of all of these things that I've done wrong that I now have a process and I work with that process. Now, some of this process is based on things that I learned at Microsoft in hiring and working through all of the HR courses that I took, but I've also iterated on this on my own. And that's a big part of this as well, is that you're going to iterate on your own process to find who you're looking for. So it starts with defining who the ideal candidate really is. And I break this out into hard skills, soft skills, team balance, and culture fit. Now, hard skills are going to be things like the education. What kind of degree do they have? What software or applications do they know how to use? And what methodologies do they already know? That's going to be really important because it affects some of these other pieces as well, such as team balance, where in the team balance, it's really important to have people with a different skill set. You want to have a lot of diversity in terms of their backgrounds. And mostly because if you have all of the same people at all the same level, it makes your job really hard as a manager. But if you have different people at different levels with different skill sets, each one can learn something different from the other person. I've had experiences where one person was really good at one thing, but not as good at the other thing. And then a separate person would be the exact opposite. And so you have them work together on a project and all of a sudden they learn from each other. And that's what you really want to have happen as you're managing a team, because that way you're able to encourage these learning opportunities to happen. And so I also try to have like a bell curve of balance in the team, so that if there are some senior people, they can mentor the junior people. And then the mid-level people can also mentor the junior people in some ways. And the senior person isn't mentoring everybody. Another aspect is soft skills. And there are things such as communication, professionalism, independence, collaboration. These are all areas that are really important to make sure that you get the right person, because you, like I said, you don't want to get that person that's like, oh, I can do everything by myself, and they just go off on their own. And then all of a sudden they're, wasting a whole bunch of time that they could have been doing the right thing. And then this last area here is culture fit. And culture fit is important because you have to have a person that works with other people on your team. And that doesn't mean that they have to be the same or that they come from the same culture. We actually have a lot of people and from different backgrounds within our team, but we work together really well because we have a shared set of values. And so for us, a really important value is the value of authenticity, which is why I named the company Authentic UX, because being your authentic self is really important. And if you're having a hard day, you're having a hard day. It's okay to be that. It's about being truthful about where you're at and about being collaborative and helping each other out. Another aspect of culture that I really find important is celebration of the things that go wrong. And I don't even want to call it a mistake, because we all make so many mistakes that it's really more about what did we learn from this experience and how can we build our processes to be better so that that mistake doesn't happen ever again. And then we have new mistakes that we make. but we've actually started this culture of celebrating things that go wrong because it means that we have an ability to make the whole process better for everybody. That's the thing that we look for, but your exact culture may be slightly different. And so it's really important to determine what it is that matters to you about your culture. And then you can start developing your interview script. And you're going to take all of these things in these different categories and build it into your interview script. So as an example, I've hired someone as a short-term contractor for a project, and it was a disaster. But as we looked back and said, okay, where did this go off track? And we started adding questions into our interview script so that we're able to find the thing that went wrong. And so in that particular case, it was a communication aspect where the person didn't know what to do, didn't communicate that, was off like running on their own, and then wasted a whole bunch of time. And then we just had to spend double the time redoing stuff because they didn't know what they were doing. So now we have questions like, hey, and this is an important aspect, you can have hypothetical questions or situational questions. So situational questions are, tell me about a time when blah, blah, blah. You dealt with a difficult person. Note, always have a difficult person story. And hypothetical questions, you can always take a situational question and then turn it into a hypothetical. Hypothetical is like, I don't really know. Maybe I don't think I actually dealt with that exact situation, but okay, how would you respond if? And those can really help you, especially in determining things like the soft skills. Hard skills are actually something that can be learned. Like you can always learn a new application or tool or methodology. That's easy. The soft skills are the thing that soft skills and culture fit are really the thing that I think about the most when I'm hiring, because they're the things that by default, people aren't really going to change that much. You're not going to change suddenly how collaborative you are, or how communicative you are. You want to just find the person that naturally responds in the right way, that naturally is more professional. And that's where things like punctuality come into play in professionalism. Like, are they camera ready? Are they client ready? Do they look like they're put together? That's a thing that we look for, and you can really tell. And I actually have, I'm jumping ahead, but I actually have part of in our interview script, in our whole process, I actually have a video that I have people put together as part of their application. And it's because I want to see what they look like. I want to see if how they present themselves and if they present themselves professionally. So you develop your interview script based on all of the hard skills, soft skills. The team balance, you can ask kind of about their educational background and that kind of thing, and you find out that way. And then you'll also have questions about your culture fit. So then you develop your interview team. Now, the team is really important that you bring together because you want to have the same team interviewing each candidate. So if I have a position open for a junior researcher, it'll be me, it'll be my COO, and probably our senior researcher, and we'll all interview that person and come up with a hire, no hire decision. And this is the thing I got from Microsoft, the idea that everyone on the team is going to see something different. And so it's really important to involve others in the process as well. I found that when I interview someone and then my co-founder interviews someone, the same person, will come up with different things, but then we'll also talk to each other about, hey, I saw this, what did you think? And vice versa. And then it helps us to really complete a broader perspective of what that person can bring. Listening is another aspect that's super important, because as you are listening, you're listening to yourself, to the candidate, and to others on the team. It's really important to listen to what the candidate says is important to them. I've actually not hired someone, this is an example of a false negative. I didn't hire someone who wanted to work on a different org, that wanted to do something slightly different. And I didn't hire them because I really wanted them in the position that they were in because they were really good, but because I didn't listen to what their needs were, it ended up not working out. And then it didn't happen the way that I wanted it to happen later either. Not great. You have to listen to your gut. Whenever you see those red flags and you think, oh, it'll be okay. I know that this person is just stressed out, or this was just difficult, or they're really nervous. Like, you can explain away a lot of things, but when you see a red flag, you have to just say like, hey, this was a red flag. And oh wow, you didn't get along with the interviewer. What was wrong there? What happened? It's a red flag. You got to listen to yourself and say, you know what, it's okay that this didn't work out because it's not the right person. As much as you might think that it's the right person, those false positives are the most difficult because you have so much excitement around that person because you think that they're the right person, but they really aren't. And I've had several examples of hiring someone that just wasn't the right person. And it's because I wasn't listening to myself enough. I wasn't listening to my gut when I said, oh, that's not the right thing to say, or oh, I worry that they're going to have trouble with this, and this. Eventually, they did have that trouble. So experiment on your own processes, but also give a test like experiment, like, give the candidate an opportunity to think on their feet. And this is a really fun thing that I like to do. And this can be done in several different ways. If you are in a larger corporation, you might even build in some kind of a test project throughout the day of the interview loop. Or actually, we build it into an earlier part in our process where after we go through some of the initial steps, I have the candidates put together a example study for a product that they pick. But it's really for me to just understand how they think and kind of assess where they're at in terms of their skill level of the knowledge of the methodology and what you can get out of it and what they just kind of how they approach problems. It's a really good way to help people to show themselves in a way that allows you to assess where they're at. And now this last step is iteration. This is so important because as you hire people, you learn and grow from each experience. And if you hired someone that you realize later was a false negative or false positive, all right, what happened? How can we address that by adding a different question or a different step in the process of interviewing in order to find that person and weed them out as sooner in the process? So that is the process that I've been working on. Again, it's been evolving and iterating itself over time, but this is how I go about weeding out those takers and avoiding those false positives. And when you really put your culture of your company first and you put the soft skills first, it really helps to find those right people so that you're not making those failures. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm excited to be at our Q&A later on, and I have additional resources at the end of this for the job seekers.